Happy Wednesday, YouTube. Happy Wednesday, everyone. And I'd like to welcome my guests, Dr. Smith.
Hello.
And Luke.
Hello.
Right, now, this is an oddly Anglo-centric story, well, a London-centric story, though I always like to think that when I pick British stories, they are ones that kind of do resonate internationally. The London Mayor, Boris Johnson, has bought 3 water cannons, and the UK has never had water cannons before. But I gather the US has them, Germany has them, Germany makes them. That's where we bought them from. And exactly what Boris Johnson is anticipating that would require them, who knows, but I suppose there have been riots here. There's also been a lot of perfectly reasonable and peaceful protest here as well. A protester from Germany who was blinded for life by a water cannon has come here warning us, saying, no, don't use these. And that's it. At the moment, Boris Johnson doesn't have permission from the Home Office to actually deploy these water cannons. When interviewed on radio, Boris Johnson was challenged. If you think water cannons are so safe and fine and whatever, would you agree to be shot by a water cannon? Now, he's a politician. He's been Mayor of London for 2 terms now. He's a pompous Tory twat. And I should imagine out of 7 million Londoners, I reckon most of them are going to want to turn up. The ones who don't see it on TV, people are going to want to see. Someone's been mayor of your city. You get to see them shot by a water cannon. And yeah, if he thinks they're so safe. So actually, in a way, he's done something I wish more politicians would do. I say put them in the stocks, throw vegetables at them, anything, So serious in a way, because how are you treating your citizens when they protest, which could potentially blind them, and there's going to be more and more calls for people to protest on the streets. I'm thinking that's the way things are going. On the other hand, it's kind of a voter's wet dream to actually take the powers that be and, well, shoot them. Who wouldn't want to do that? So, Dr. Smith, your thoughts?
Now, I've never had any experience with the water cannons. I've seen them used. That being said, I've seen riots before. Pittsburgh, just before I left my military base, had one. And on one hand, I think that it would be a very useful tool. And on the other hand, just like you'd pointed out before, it can be very dangerous. It depends really on what kind of a crowd you're having, I would think. You'd want to choose to use some sort of device like that.
Well, yeah, particularly as protesters who, all right, let's suppose, we did have some very serious riots in London about 3 or 4 years ago. There was a lot of destruction of property. People were endangered. It became an excuse to loot. There was originally a proper cause, but it became an excuse to loot. But there have also been some very legitimate protests, particularly, this millennia so far, there have been a lot of protests. And also, there could be a lot of young people, a lot of students, there could even be minors, as in kids, people under the age of 18. It's got a call for quite... you're ex-military and you're ex-military police. How extreme do things get when you start risking, essentially, we blind someone? That's maiming. To risk maiming women and children, that's got to be serious, like red alert level rioting, hasn't it?
Yes, and when you put it that way, let's clarify first. Are you talking about women and children being in a sort of a riot, or are you talking about a fear of women and children being injured?
Well, a fear of women and children being injured, but I'm bearing in mind what I'm saying is the thing with governments is, can we trust them only to deploy a weapon when it's necessary? If it's a peaceful, people waving placards saying, we oppose this military action, or whatever, most likely now it would be more to do with poverty, more to do with social justice. If you're just going to, and quite a lot of protests are student protests, so there's a lot of young people there, there might even be teenagers. because I can just, it's that question of deployment of any weapon, is if it's in the hands of someone who's going to open fire because they get a bit nervous or they're just very authoritarian, versus, I'm not suggesting, well, actually, women and children, I think some of the protesters were in the London riots, maybe not very many. Certainly there would have been kids under the age of 18. But yeah, to answer your question, I'm very concerned, particularly about just like blinding some kid because they're protesting something, even if the protest isn't entirely peaceful.
I think a device like that is to be used in extreme measures. Now, I mean, in our country, we've had incidents like Ohio, where the students were shot upon, which was a tragedy in itself. And then we've had other incidents, of course, where we had the L.A. riots after the Rodney King verdict.
Of course, right.
And I think using those two examples might be a good way to kind of point out, had we had the water cannons for, the Ohio shootings, would that have been effective? Well, no, I don't think it would have needed to have happened. Those kids were doing a protest. To my understanding, I don't think they were doing anything violent, if I remember. Whereas you got something like the L.A. riots, where, if I remember correctly, we had enforced martial law. And for those that don't know what is martial law, that's when the government has taken over the city and there's a strict curfew and you don't get out of your house at a particular time. There was looting going on. There were fires. You had several African Americans. Well, the majority of that population in L.A. was infuriated with that whole incident that went down. My take on the whole thing, I'm kind of getting off topic here, though, is water cannons in that circumstance, I think, would have been acceptable because it was known you don't go out and you don't do particular things like crash windows into, appliance stores and be walking out with TV sets. And they needed to find some way to kind of calm the people in L.A. other than pulling a gun out and shooting them. And, if somebody had their eyes, if they had lost their sight in that kind of a circumstance, well, I hate to say it, you had it coming to you.
Okay. Luke, your thoughts?
Yeah. I don't know that there's really any way to pacify an angry mob in a way that isn't going to make them more angry. And I think that we seem to be going off a lot of just what people say. Just because one person was blinded through the use of a water cannon doesn't mean that that's the expected or necessary result. I think that we need actual people, instead of politicians and talking heads, that are presenting situations and then assessing possible resolutions. Maybe there are other mechanisms. I would be very nervous about any kind of weapon that was strongly affiliated with a certain political group, though, because it seems like in that case, then you could have political ideas surrounding the use and deployment of that weapon, whether or not that would be used to target enemies or whether or not it would be used to discredit politicians. It just seems like from the second it becomes polarizing, it becomes more dangerous. One thing I do know, though, is that when law enforcement, which I assume is who would be deploying the water cannons, have historically been given non-lethal weapons, they have used them excessively. I read one story once, I apologize, I don't remember where it was from, where police were issued pepper spray and they were instructed to only use it when they would have otherwise used a gun.
Right.
The statistics came in on how often it was deployed, and it was like hundreds of times more frequent than the previous use of guns. They were just ignoring the recommendation altogether.
Right.
I don't know how dangerous water cannons are or what the alternatives are, but I think that we need to be talking about a cost-benefit analysis just rather than listening to people's personal stories, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I admit, okay, I've cited only one person being actually injured by one. I mean, obviously the UK, as I'm sure you know, well, technically the UK police do have guns in that Northern Irish police are armed. In England and Wales, there's an arms division called SO19 that you call out. Although I could point out, I can't remember how many years it's been since they shot a white person, but it's been decades. And the last person I can recall being shot was that Brazilian man who was shot on the underground on suspicion of being an Islamic terrorist when he was neither a terrorist nor a Muslim or anything to do with a man who looked a bit dark. But I mean, are you kind of implying that if you could have police just so that one of them can fire their gun into the air and shut the crowd up for a bit and talk, like just to fire the gun in the air, not hurt anyone, that would be a better option than something like a water cannon ending up hurting someone?
I don't know that I'm necessarily implying that. What I would like in the discussion, though, is some kind of scientific analysis of various crowd control mechanisms that have been used, and some non-biased statistics on, the efficacy and the danger associated with it. And that's the kind of information that I would need to make an informed decision. I can't just listen to one person's experience of being blinded, because I'm sure that there's somebody who's been blinded walking down the street. Now, I can understand why he would have very strong emotions about this, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that is a normal consequence of using the weapon. But you don't have to be a scientist to look at, the race riots roughly a half century ago here in the United States and see people being hit by water cannons to know that, hey, this thing might be dangerous.
Well, yeah. Okay. Dr. Smith, do you have anything to add at that point?
Well, he brought up the pepper spray thing, and not at all am I trying to pick a fight with you, Luke. I'm just curious, those statistics, did they talk about how these officers had been trained with the pepper spray? Do you remember any of that by chance? If there
Honestly,
was anything brought up in
it was a very long time ago that I read the article. The point was, it was supposed to be a replacement for lethal force,
Sure.
And it ended up being used routinely. Whether or not that was a training issue or not, I can't comment.
The reason I bring that up is with my training, lethal force, we would be trained that yearly when I was in the military. And quite honestly, it's a very tiring process. We had what we called a weapon called an ASP, where we'd have to have training with that. And basically you'd have somebody in a suit it was rubber and very thick, and you were to beat on them for 2 minutes. I think it was 2 minutes straight, a particular way. You couldn't hit the head, you couldn't hit under the armpits or between the legs. You had specific spots you could hit somebody, and they stressed this in the training. It wasn't just something that they gave you and like, here you go at it. I also, when I was a security guard for a mall, I had to go through a pepper spray course, and let me tell you something, and I don't say this lightly. When you get hit with pepper spray, which you have to have happen in this course, it is the most unpleasant experience.
Wow. Yeah, I can imagine.
And even to stand by when somebody's getting sprayed, it's a mist, and it's going to carry around. Where I'm going with this is that I'm curious as to these people that were using the pepper spray, had they been properly trained with it. That being said, with the water cannon, I think the only way to really show somebody how devastating it could be is much like this politician that you're talking about, and they want him to be sprayed by it to see the effects of it. If you are on the receiving end of it and then you're handed it, you're going to know what that can do. So you're going to be a little more mindful of attacking somebody with it as opposed to just like, here you go.
I would just like to interject here. I don't think that you can generally have a policy that a weapon cannot be deployed unless it's been used on everybody involved, because we need, presumably, weapons of various efficacies up to and including killing people. So, I mean, maybe if you wanted to say that anything that was considered routine had to be used on everybody, that would be different. But decision makers at some point are going to have to be able to look at numbers and efficacy ratings and make decisions that are not based off their own personal emotions and experiences. I can also see this going the other way. Somebody having been pepper sprayed or similar, and then being reluctant to use the right weapon because of some kind of emotional feeling that they had, rather than making the most logical. Now, I know that sounds ridiculous in the context of government, but it seems like that's the mechanism that we're attempting to work on. We want people to make the right logical decision based on their own personal experiences and feelings, and I'm not sure that that's a good method for going forward. I consider myself numbers-oriented, and that's what I like to see. I like to see numbers and results.
You don't think there should be a balance between... it almost sounds like a sort of balance between the Kirk approach and the Spock approach, and that you're kind of going with the Spock approach, if you see what I mean. But you kind of do need a bit of both.
Well, I'm not saying that you should be completely emotionless. I'm just saying that at some point you should be able to look at paper and statistics and be able to make a decision. I don't think that the only people who should be able to order an execution should be people who have already been executed. I mean, assuming
of course you're not going to have that, but on the other hand, if you were of sound mind, and let me be clear on this, not everybody is of sound mind in this world, to have the common sense that, hey, I'm inside a mall, I probably shouldn't pepper spray somebody. I would think the logic would dictate much the same with a water cannon, wow, there's a small child there, I probably shouldn't shoot him. Because you'd been hit by it, and you know how powerful that pressure is with that thing.
Yeah, but I don't think that people who are firing these water cannons are doing it because they don't think that it's going to have any negative effects. Usually I think that they would have received instructions from higher-ups, instructions which they're either going to disregard, which is simply going to add to a situation, the anarchy of a situation, or they're going to follow what they were told, in which case it's not their decision.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how the pecking order would work, but that is a point in that there is a kind of, some people will, if you'll excuse the phrase, just obey orders. Okay, I'm just going to ask, does anybody have any? Just open up the floor. Anyone want to add anything more?
I do not have anything to add.
Okay, I'm going to sort of expand on. I'm just going to sort of throw it on a lighter note. Dr. Smith, what do you think of the idea of seeing a politician, such as, for example, the mayor of your city, someone like that, just someone in the powers that be, just seeing them shot with a water cannon? Do you think that's fantastic?
I don't know if I'd use the word fantastic, but I think that by them going out and having that done, and then if they realize how damaging that can be, realize that that's a powerful weapon, that's just not something that's just going to push people off to the wayside. That could be a tool, in a manner of speaking, to show them, as well as show other people the seriousness of this. Yeah, and I guess if he actually goes, well, if he doesn't go through with it, well, everyone will know who's a pussy, but if he goes through with it, I don't have much good to say about Boris Johnson, but at least and I've never voted for him, but at least it would show the courage of his convictions. Luke, I think what I'm trying to convey is a sort of fantasy of politicians. Don't you just sometimes want to shoot them with something?
It sounds like you're trying to steer me in a specific direction. Sure. That sometimes I do, especially particular ones.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that it's time for closing thoughts and goodbyes. So, Dr. Smith?
I would say to your politician to be responsible and really think about this as far as who you're handing these devices off to before you let people run rampant with them.
And Luke, final thought and goodbye?
Final thought. Well, I don't think that this is going to change anything. He's already bought the devices, and we just have to wait to see if he gets shot with it and says, "Okay, we're not using that on anybody." That would be a victory as far as I'm concerned.
Amen. And on that bombshell, it's good night from me.